Hello everyone, welcome to San Diego Comic-Con 2022. We are at the NECA booth with none other than Zach Galligan from Gremlins and Gremlins 2. How are you, Zach?
Doing great, man. It's an amazing scene here.
Awesome. Welcome back to Comic-Con.
Thank you very much. It's been 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, last time I was here was for Hatchet 3.
Oh my gosh, another classic.
Well, you know, Hatchet 1 and 2 left so many questions unanswered. I had to do Hatchet 3.
Absolutely. Today we're going to be talking about, of course, Gremlins,
Sure.
which NECA has the product license for, and which you're signing a Greta in wedding dress today.
Yeah, NECA does incredible work with the Gremlins franchise, and I'm constantly seeing stuff on social media, especially Instagram, for all the NECA toys and everything, and it's like really doing a phenomenal job at just keeping the franchise and everything alive.
So when you were filming Gremlins, there
Sure.
were a couple of different scenes in there that were a little bit dangerous with the chainsaw and the bat sort of thing. Were there any things that made you more nervous like that in either film?
It's kind of hard to describe to people who weren't there, but the early 80s vibe on sets was very, very relaxed in terms of rules.
Right.
And so, say for example, when we blew up the movie theater, spoiler, we blow up the movie theater.
Spoilers.
I would go over and I'd be like, so what are you guys doing? They're like, yeah, we're gonna blow up the movie theater. And I'm like, okay, so is that dynamite that you're packing into it? And they're like, yeah, that's dynamite. I'm like, how big's it gonna be? And they're like, it's gonna be pretty big. It's like, do you have any specificity going on here? Or are you just like kind of winging it? So originally, Phoebe and I were going to stand in front of the car for the explosion. And when I went and talked to the guys and they were so vague about how big the explosion was going to be, I went and I told Joe Dante and he goes, really? And I go, yeah. And he goes, let's reblock it and put you behind the car. And he put us behind the car. When the theater blew up, it was about 3 or 4 times bigger than they thought it was going to be.
Wow.
And it broke windows blocks away in the Universal City. Some of the executive suites, they came in Monday morning, it was nothing but shattered glass.
Oh, wow.
It was way, way bigger. It was not supposed to blow the doors off the theater, blew the doors off the theater.
I'm glad he moved you. He needed you for the sequel.
And when the explosion came, it like singed our eyebrows.
Holy.
The heat was so intense. So they were playing kind of fast and loose about 40 years ago.
Yeah.
There's a lot more rules and regulations now.
How is it working with the actual animatronics on set?
Well, I mean, you know, there's a couple of answers to that question. First of all, it's no more difficult or strange working with a puppet than it is working with an actress who you met 10 minutes ago.
Right.
Hey, she's playing your wife. Now go and like, you know, make love to her. It's like, I don't even know this person and you're getting naked in bed with them. Like that's very, very strange. So working with a puppet is actually a lot easier because you can control it. It has wires and cables and whatnot, and you can say cut, and it just sits there.
Right.
Doesn't complain to the director. As far as the technical stuff is concerned, Chris Wallace, who designed all the original stuff for the first one, it was Rick Baker who took over the second one.
Yes, correct.
He had to create the animatronics pretty much from scratch.
Yeah.
And they kept asking him to do new thing after new thing. Can you make them break dance? Can you make them skateboard? Can you make a flasher gremlin? You know, and each one was like a 3-week unbelievable headache for him to figure out how are you going to get these creatures to do these things that they want them to do. And they would break constantly. Yeah. You know, the cables would snap. The dog one time in the Christmas scene when I give, you know, when I get it as a Christmas present, and the dog's sniffing around it. Dog stepped on his head and ripped his ear out.
Oh, man.
That was a 9-hour delay. But it was cool because Spielberg was like, hey, if there are long delays, just go over to my office and you can play my video games. And he had these stand-up arcade games. I'd go over there, I'd play Pole Position, Millipede, Ms. Pac-Man over there. Sometimes I'd play with him, and that was like, is this real life?
Was Steven Spielberg on set a lot? How involved was he?
Well, he was involved a lot in the beginning. He did the casting. He cast me and Phoebe. He shaped the script. And he sort of made a bunch of key changes, really key changes. Like, for example, when my mother discovers the Gremlins up in the attic, the Gremlins take a sword and cut her head off, and her head rolls down the stairs.
Whoa.
And Spielberg was kind of like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. But the biggest change he made is that Gizmo dies halfway through the movie and gets killed by the Gremlins. Oh, wow. And Steven said to Chris Columbus, the screenwriter, who was 22, 3 at the time, you created this beautiful character that everybody loves, and you kill him halfway through. Why don't you keep him around and make him the sidekick who helps the hero defeat the bad guys. And Chris Columbus was like, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. Because otherwise, Gizmo was ixnay on Ismo.
I had no idea.
Gay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. What was it like working with the great Dick Miller?
It's funny because when you work with Dick Miller, or when you worked with Dick Miller, rest his soul, what a great, amazing, hilarious, funny guy. First of all, there are two things about him. One, he had this 1940s, 50s perpetual quality about him. I could never put my finger on what it was, and finally I came up with a term for it. I call it retro swagger.
Okay, that's
He had
cool.
just finished storming Normandy Beach, and now he's here to kick ass and take names. You know what I mean? He had that kind of straight out of Brooklyn into World War II and Korea and out and ready to kick some butt. He was a tough guy, actually, even though he was a gentle guy.
Yeah.
But he was like, don't mess with Dick Miller.
All right.
And then the other thing was his acting style was so natural that there was almost zero difference between I'm talking to you here and I'm talking to you there, action, and I'm still doing this thing, and there's absolutely no difference between my regular self and my acting self. So he was incredibly natural. And at first I was like, as a neophyte actor, I was kind of like, this guy isn't even doing a performance. I can't even tell that he's acting. Yes. That's the secret, not to see it, dum-dum. So
great.
It changed a lot about what I did within a couple of days, just watching him. And I'm going, I bet I could communicate that doing a lot less than I'm actually doing.
Wow. Instant teacher right there on
Instant
set. Wow.
Yeah, Hoyt Axton, same way. He had trouble memorizing lines, like the rules and everything like that. Joe Dante was like, you know what, Hoyt? Just say it the way you would say it. Just get the 2 or 3 key points across, get the rules across. You can say it any way you want. Let's just try that. So the take that's in the movie is when he goes, they hate bright light. We know that. They hate bright light. And that's him just being Okie, being in Oklahoma and doing his speech, putting his speech pattern into the story. And he's way better doing that than trying to play a character and recite the rules and whatnot.
Speaking of the humor in Gremlins, humor is of course in both of them, but the first one's more of a horror story than the second. Where the
Much
second
more.
one gets zanier. Do you like the Gremlins to be a little scarier, or did you like how they went, what direction they went in?
I'm always a Gremlins 1 guy. I always will be. I just think it's leaner. I mean, if you like the kitchen sink idea, just throw everything in, then Gremlins 2 is your movie. But if you like a perfectly told story with great characters and the direction is lean, there's not a moment wasted, not a moment really you would take out. Everything is necessary. It works beautifully. It does one of the hardest things ever, balances horror and comedy. It's that 1 second, you're scared, and the next second, Mrs. Deagle is rocketing through the window and dying, and you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. But then you see her red shoes, and oh my God, she's the Wicked Witch.
Right.
And it's funny, and it refers to movies, and it's clever, and Jerry Goldsmith's score undercuts the nastiness, and it's just really a brilliantly made movie.
Yeah.
And I'm just a part of it. I mean, Joe Dante and John Horr, the DP, and everybody who did it, it's one of those things where you capture lightning in a bottle and the movie just works perfectly, even 38 years later.
Yeah, we were speaking before, 38 years, that's amazing that it's held up all this time.
Well, one of the things you notice about it is it's not really dated. There's not a lot of technology in it. It doesn't say where it's taking place. It doesn't say when it's taking place. It's kind of like any town, USA, at any time, at any Christmas, anywhere you want. Anytime it could happen.
Yeah.
So it doesn't date itself.
You've spoken before that the security guards checked the car and everything when you left the set. Were you able to get a memento from either film for the old shelf at home?
Yeah, it's funny that people's fascination with whether or not I get props or not is so interesting to me.
They want it themselves, I think.
I guess that's probably it. That's probably exactly it. Yeah. So I got the sword that I cut the gremlin head off with.
Okay.
And I got the baseball bat from
cool.
the chainsaw scene.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I got, because they were checking so much on Gremlins 2, I mean, they really you see the security here, it was the same kind of security there. So the only thing I managed to get from Gremlins 2 was there was a mock-up of a Daniel Clamp book, and the cover was John Glover leaning against it, and it says, Daniel Clamp, I'll take Manhattan.
Awesome.
Because it just acquires everything.
Yes.
And so I have that slip cover.
Okay, that's
It was
fun.
on it was on a fake book. It was just a slip cover.
Right.
But I have that slip cover and a Splice of Life genetics badge from the actual movie. So
That's exciting.
that's basically all the memorabilia. It was very tough to sneak stuff out.
I know you can't speak much about it, I'm sure.
Sure.
Secrets of the Mogwai
Yes.
is the new animated series coming out.
10-part animated series. Yep, on
Excellent.
HBO Max, and then that's the first run, and the second run will be on Cartoon Network probably for decades.
Okay, and you have some animated voice work in that? Or?
I do some animated voice work. Can't say much.
Okay.
Takes place in 1920s China. Obviously, I'm not going to be Billy. Billy wasn't even alive
That's
then.
right.
So just to clarify some things, the people
Yes.
were confused on social media.
Yes.
It's a very different character. I can say this, doesn't sound like me.
Okay.
It's a real character voice. Very, very different, polar opposite from Billy. And
But it's nice to still be involved, right, in
it's
some
great
way.
to be involved. It's a recurring part. It's not like one or two lines.
Great.
You'll see me. You'll definitely see me.
Excellent.
It's not like Stan Lee where he shows up, says a line, and then you're like, I went to the men's room. Did I miss Stan Lee? Yeah, you did, because he did it for like 30 seconds.
Right.
So it's a nice little supporting part. The animation is brilliant and doesn't look like any other cartoon I've ever seen.
Okay.
And I'm really, really, especially after the screening yesterday, I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Oh, they showed it yesterday.
We showed the first episode at the panel,
Okay.
all 22 minutes of it. And there are a couple of moments, I can't give anything away,
Sure.
where you'll get a little tug.
Okay, good.
You'll hear
Good.
You'll hear some things, especially audio-wise. You'll hear some things and some little references to songs and notes and things like that. And you'll be like, oh. And then you'll be like, oh, that's where that comes from. And so the origins and the explanations are all really very well thought out and clever. It's great.
Has it opened any doors for a Gremlins 3? Anything new on that?
You never really know, but it's very difficult to imagine that if the series takes off, they just don't do live action next, especially if the toy sales go through the roof. I mean, and who better to talk to about toy sales going
Than
through
NECA.
the roof than NECA? That's
I have
incredible.
one last question. and
Sure.
It's a 38-year-old debate. People ask it with Die Hard all the time.
It's a Christmas movie now.
You heard it here. You
It's a
heard it
Christmas
here. You
movie now.
confirmed.
It wasn't, but it became one.
Yep.
So it basically transformed into one. And that's just the way it is, Bruce Willis can argue all he wants to about Die Hard not being a Christmas movie, but the bottom line is it is now.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really get to say. I don't get to say. It's not up to me. It's up to these guys.
That's right. We say it.
And the
Gremlins is a Christmas movie.
And people
I
have
watch it every
spoken.
year.
It is a Christmas movie. I get literally 10 to 15 times more engagement, maybe 15 times, 20 times more engagement in the 3 weeks leading up to Christmas than I do all year long.
Wow.
I mean, my phone is just like a popcorn machine.
There you go. Well, thanks so much, Zach, for your time today and
Totally my
stopping by
pleasure.
the NECA booth.
Let's do a signing, shall we?
Absolutely. And we'd like
All
to
right.
thank you very much for that. There's your
Sure.
own Greta.
That's mine?
That's yours. You can
Oh.
sign it yourself.
It's the only Greta figure I actually own.
Thanks, everyone. Comic-Con
Thanks, guys.
2020. We're with Zach Galligan here at the booth.